Our first presenter is with Haemonetics Corporation. Eva Casamento, did I say that right, or is that close?
It's exactly right, Ty.
Oh, you're right. You're just got it. So Global VP in Marketing. So why don't we go ahead and move forward?
Very good. Thank you so much. Really appreciate being here with all of you. So last year's symposium, we shared how Haemonetics was dealing with the COVID-19 environment. So I thought I would provide you with an update. And even though we're very much still immersed in the pandemic, we think it's an appropriate time to reflect on some of the lessons learned to date. I know you're all aware that Haemonetics' focus is all about blood. And we have 3 different businesses, and they each have a focus on blood and have a role to play in continuing to work through the pandemic. So the hospital business unit is where Cell Saver and TEG belong. That's where I belong. And from the onset of the pandemic, we were really focused on keeping our products in the hands of perfusionists and other healthcare professionals so you could treat patients who are coming to your hospitals. Our plasma business unit focused on, of course, continuing to collect plasma specimens for patients who have immunodeficiency diseases, but also took part in some really interesting research and conversations about the role of convalescent plasma. And our blood center business unit is really the oldest and the origination point for Haemonetics. They worked with blood collection centers around the world to mitigate shortages of blood during COVID-19. And we know there's still a lot of shortages with people concerned about donating blood. But also a year ago, as we were starting our new fiscal year, our CEO gave us 6 different strategic priorities. And right at the very top was the one that you see here in blue. It was to provide safety and business continuity with a through cycle mindset. And what that meant was, he said to us who are leaders, it's not enough to just manage through the pandemic. I want you to think about actions and programs and behaviors that you can engage in now so that when we come out on the other side of the pandemic, Haemonetics will be stronger and better in some way. So we set about to do that. And I thought of 4 different things I really wanted to share with you as the keys to our successful navigation so far. And when I was creating this slide to share with you, what I came to realize is that the North Star through all of these things was a focus on people and caring about people. So right at the top, we never lost sight of our customers. We would begin and end every conversation with you, with patients and doctors and nurses, perfusionists, and other healthcare professionals who use our products. First and foremost, we knew we had to keep our factories open and our global supply chain fully operational. So we had 2 shifts in most factories. We changed it to 3 so people could spread out. We put plexiglass between people if we couldn't socially distance them. We staggered start and end times of shifts and lunch times so that people couldn't congregate in common areas. And I'm really pleased to say that we didn't have any incidents of COVID-19 outbreaks in any of our facilities as a result of those actions. The second thing we learned how to do was implementing our products remotely. So we're using Zoom today, and believe it or not, we use Zoom to help implement things like TEG and blood track software remotely when lockdowns prevented our people from going in person. We also cared about our employees. We told them that their safety was paramount and they should adhere to local regulations and hospital rules. And when hospitals did want our people there, we had a robust PPE and testing program that we were able to put into place to keep them safe. We also found that we wanted to maintain connection with our customers through virtual learning events. So I would say in a typical year, the hospital business has 6 to 8 different clinical education events in person. And we really dug deep and delivered more than 24 virtual clinical education events over the past year. And I also want to share that we delivered about 50 internal training events. So when we were on lockdown, we delivered 2 training events per week to our sales team so we could sharpen their skills so they would be prepared for when we were out of lockdown. And finally, I think we all learned how to pivot and flex. And there's many great examples of that. The one that I want to share with you came to be about 3 months ago when the FDA issued guidance on the use of viscoelastic testing for hospitalized COVID-19 patients. So prior to that guidance, it was off-label for us to talk about utilizing TEG 5000 or TEG 6S in the care of COVID-19 patients. But by May, there were clinical articles that were published coming out of Italy initially showing how they were using TEG to monitor hypercoagulability in COVID patients. So we gathered that article along with about a half a dozen others that came out over the coming months and started a conversation with FDA. And ultimately, it culminated in this guidance document. And within a couple of weeks after it was issued, we were able to change our labeling to be compliant with this guidance so that our reps could then have on-label conversations with customers about the use of TEG 5000 and TEG 6S with COVID-19 patients. Well, we're already starting to think about a world beyond COVID-19. So again, I know we're immersed in the pandemic, but there are articles that are being published, and the one that caught our attention was published in January by the Harvard Business Review, and the lead author is Dev Patnaik. And it was interesting because they made analogies between the pandemic and 9/11, right? So another really large time of crisis where we talked about the world before 9/11 and the world after 9/11. And pretty soon in the near future, we're going to be talking about pre-pandemic world and post-pandemic world. And one of the ways we want to predict on what kind of changes in our behavior are going to be sustained in the post-COVID-19 environment. So they bucketed behaviors in 3 groups: sustained behaviors, transformed behaviors, and collapsed behaviors. So sustained behaviors are those that are likely to return to their pre-crisis state virtually unchanged. And the 9/11 example they gave was people staying in hotels. So it totally plummeted after 9/11, but ultimately over time it returned to its pre-9/11 levels. Transformed behaviors are those that are likely to return after the crisis, albeit with fundamental changes. And the example with 9/11 was when air travel resumed, there were much stricter security protocols in place. And while security technology had been available, airports started to make substantial improvements in security technology, and it was a boon to those systems manufacturers. And the third group is sort of in between sustained and transformed. They called it collapsed behaviors. So these are those that are likely to cease or be replaced by alternatives. The 9/11 example is that you could no longer take coffee or a beverage through the security checkpoint. So today, you're going to see far fewer coffee shops and beverage stands pre-checkpoint, but those have all migrated post-checkpoint. So as we reflect on things from the Haemonetics standpoint, I think our factories are going to fall under that sustained behavior. Eventually, post-pandemic, the plexiglass will come down and people will start to be able to eat lunch again with their friends in the cafeteria. So that'll probably be sustained. When we think about transformed, I actually think it's meetings. They're probably going to continue in a hybrid way. And here's some place where perfusion.com was really ahead of the curve, because this meeting, the Sanibel Symposium, has been hybrid for multiple years. For you, this transition to a virtual meeting was probably not too far of a stretch, but it sure was for a lot of other scientific societies. I think that we're going to see all the international meetings continue virtually this year. Perhaps in the United States in the latter part of the year, we'll start to see some hybrid meetings, but I think hybrid meetings are here to stay. A lot of it's the value of the healthcare professionals, their time away from the hospital, and especially these global meetings that might have required multiple days of travel. And finally, with collapsed behaviors, I think the way we install our equipment might fall into this category, where if we have a new customer, say they're putting in TEG 6S for the first time, they might want our personnel to be on premise. However, a system that has maybe 10 TEG 6S's and is adding to that may choose to have us do a remote implementation. So I invite all of you to think about how this might apply to you. It's a conversation that's very active at Haemonetics, and I'm sure will continue. So all that remains for me right now is to thank you. I want to thank all of you for the important work you do as perfusionists. And I want to thank perfusion.com for sustaining the Sanibel Symposium in this virtual environment. And we look forward, whether it's hybrid or in person, we look forward to participating in continued years. So thank you very much.